And now, your feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled streaming review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, it's post-Oscar season, but it's also Oscar season.
I knew
I'm
you were
so
going to go
excited to be talking about Mac tonight.
there. Today we are reviewing the first 4 episodes of Marvel Studios' Moon Knight, which is premiering this Wednesday, March the 30th on Disney Plus, with I believe just the first episode, and then it will be week to week moving forward. Just to kick it off to start, we are doing this completely spoiler free, minus what you've seen in the trailers, and we will be not alluding to anything, but obviously we're going to be talking up to the end of episode 4. We won't say specifics or anything like that. So if you want to be, completely like not know anything, then you're best to kind of bounce out. But we won't be spoiling any major plot points or anything like that. We're just going to give you, thoughts and impressions on these first 4 episodes. We're not going to get into specifics of the story or anything like that. And we're only really, even just what's been shown in the trailers kind of is what we'll kind of cover when it comes to specifics. But that being said, Eric, how are you? Yeah, it's been a long we're recording this post Oscars, as you mentioned. We just recorded our 119th draft of the Untitled Movie Podcast. Not draft, we just call them episodes now, but draft of the Untitled Movie Podcast, where we recapped the entire 94th Academy Awards. So go check that out. It was a very, very interesting show.
It would be basically like putting glass in your shoes and walking around in it. That's kind of what the Oscars were this year.
So go check that
Uncomfortable
out.
and painful.
And that's a good segue. Let's get right into it. Eric, where do you want to start? Like, should we give people everyone who's listening probably knows. Well, maybe not. Knows about Moon Knight.
Moon Knight is one of those characters where it is kind of reaching further into the pantheon of the Marvel slate of kind of more niche properties. So Moon Knight is actually a character who started in the werewolf series Live by Night, right? Or is it Live by
Werewolf by Night?
Werewolf by Night. Live by, not the Ben Affleck movie Live by Night, but Werewolf by Night. That was the first time that Moon Knight made an appearance, and then he spun off into his own thing.
Yes,
I was watching a video tutorial from like 6 years ago that kind of like explained all of Moon Knight's trajectory. Yeah. But yes, not the Ben Affleck movie Live by Night. That's not where Moon Knight made his first appearance. Werewolf by Night was the first time,
which is getting turned into a Halloween special for
and
Disney
in
Plus.
That he's kind of almost like the way that he's described, because that was released in the 1960s, was almost like the way that Craven is to Spider-Man, where Moon Knight is an adversary at first, comes in hunting the werewolf, and then people really liked that character, and he kind of became his own thing afterwards, and then kind of had reboots. And like I think the 80s and early 90s are where he really kind of became a fan favorite within the Marvel canon. So yeah, for fans, I'm sure people know, but he's essentially the Marvel's Dark Knight. He's the kind of Batman adjacent-esque character who has split personality disorder, and is kind of focused on Oscar Isaac specifically playing a man who is both in one situation or another, and how these situations play out will also affect how you feel about the show. We've only seen the first 4 episodes, and there is
2/3 of the series.
There is a tonal pace and structure that is trying to play into the multiple personalities of the character and what the storyline is. Is it wholly successful? Well, we'll talk about that as we go along, but essentially what you have is Oscar Isaac plays 2 people. He plays Stephen Grant and Mark Spector, and these two characters could not be polar opposites. Stephen Grant is a gift shop worker at a museum in London, England, and Mark Spector is a mercenary. And we're taken into his world from the point of view of Stephen, and he's slowly starting to put the pieces together in a kind of Memento-esque kind of style structure of, you know, waking up every morning completely exhausted, bruised, and unaware of what happened the night before, or unable to piece certain aspects of his life together. And then things get a little bit supernatural or strange when supernatural elements start kind of be or interjected, whether it be a weird Egyptian god following him around, or Ethan
Voiced by
Hawke's
F. Murray Abraham.
yes Conju, or
Yeah.
the villain of the piece played by Ethan Hawke, sort of having this kind of cult like status of a leader, and having a scale of justice tattooed on his arm. So there are all these kind of things in play. It's kind of part an adventure movie or series. It's also part Minority Report, in a way that, like, you know, do you judge a person based on what they're going to do, based or wait until they've done it? If you already know what they're going to do, does that make them a bad person? So there's a lot there to kind of really chew on. I honestly don't think it's wholly successful. As much as I like, you know, both Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke being a part of the Paul Schrader verse coming into the
Yeah.
MCU, there's something about the tone and the subject matter and the handling of mental illness that I don't think, it's not offensive. I just don't think they handle it in a way that really is sincere, other than to basically move the plot forward.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I'm really struggling with this one, where obviously you guys know I'm a huge MCU guy. I pointed, there's my big Marvel Studios book here. I got a ton of Marvel stuff. I rewatch the MCU religiously, frequently, and I've pretty much liked everything they've done up until maybe like Eternals recently. And this being the sixth Disney Plus show, the first one about a brand new character. I'm somewhat familiar with Moon Knight. I read a little bit of the Alex Maleev. I think Brian Michael Bendis wrote it a little while ago, and I just, when I was dabbling back into getting into comics, I'm like, oh, this character seems cool. So I don't remember much of it, but like Moon Knight's a character I didn't know much about. Really loved the cast. You said the Schraderverse coming in full force in the MCU, having Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke involved. When you told me F. Murray Abraham was finally joining the MCU, I was all in. And like on paper, I'm like, this sounds cool. Like I'm curious to see what they're going to do. Um, After watching 4 episodes, I will kick it off by say I totally understand why they gave us 4 episodes. Because to jump off what you were saying, Eric, the tone of this series is so jarring and hard to get a grasp of that I know it's intentional, based on trying to put you into the headspace of Mark or Steven or just Moon Knight, of Oscar Isaac's character.
It's Steven with a
Um,
V.
yeah, and like even his accent in that performance, which everyone was kind of sort of poking fun at in the trailers, like, and they'll go, well, when you see the series, you'll know why. And like all that stuff makes sense in context. And then even from the filmmaking, that first episode, I just was like so taken aback, because I was like, this is not what I was expecting this to be. And I knew what the story was about him having multiple personalities involving a cult
I
kind of
should
leader and
clarify.
stuff.
So I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that we get this completely right. So
Yeah.
the description, it's called dissociative
Dissociative.
identity
Yeah.
disorder. So I just
Yeah.
want to make sure that we get that, because I even
Totally.
said multiple personality disorder
It,
before.
it
So
is. It's previously known as that, but now
yes,
it's known as dissociative identity disorder. So thank you for clarifying that. He has multiple personalities though. So like,
including Kanju, who is this
yeah,
moon god from ancient Egypt.
yeah. So that was the first one where I'm like, huh, okay. I like F. Murray Abraham. I like the look of Khonshu. Like,
I like
I'm
that he's
like,
crotchety.
I like that. Reminded me a lot of And I'm like,
Less
okay.
obnoxious, though. We
Less
should say that.
obnoxious. I think this is way better than Venom. But the way Oscar Isaac's kind of zany performance as Steven, and then the back and forth between Steven and Mark, and both of them with Conchu, and then even some of the way that his body is being controlled by one or the other was very Tom Hardy Venom. So I
Right.
always felt like it felt like Tom Hardy's Venom kind of got put into like, and I hate just lumping in like, oh, another movie with a guy with multiple or dissociative identity disorder, like Split, and then placing that person in Steven Summers' The Mummy movies. And like, that's kind of what this movie, it's not even that's just like the dumbed down way of describing it, because then when you watch it, it's so tonally jarring when it jumps from this kind of, like you said, like timid but funny Steven character to the intense Mark character versus Moon Knight, who's brutal and violent. And then the way that they showcase his disorder through the filmmaking is just, that first episode I had to like, I'm like, oh my God, I think I either have a headache or like I couldn't follow what was going
You
on.
feel like Mark or you feel like Steven when he wakes up out
And
of
I
bed
think
every
that's
morning.
entirely intentional. I just
Yeah.
don't know if it completely works. And then that's, I think what's going to, I think you're either going to love it or hate it. And I don't know if I love it or hate it. And that's the thing. Like at first I was really kind of into that first episode. But I still struggled to figure out what I thought. I was like, I like some of these choices. It is very jarring. You're jumping from wake me up before you go to in an action sequence to like,
Well, even at the
it's
beginning
just
with a Bob Dylan song
yeah,
and kind of with this kind of
but
methodical
it's
sequence setting up Ethan Hawke's villain character.
Yeah, and it's that scene is intense, and then the Marvel Studios logo kicks in, and then it jumps around to all these different tones that are way zanier than I thought, but then goes super serious, and then it becomes this Indiana Jones mummy adventure movie, and then it does all of these different things where I'm like, man, I've watched 4 episodes, but you've thrown so much at me, and you've jumped around so much that it was like hard to kind of grasp it all. And then I struggled as the episodes went on. And I feel like as the show kind of finds what it wants to be, it settles down a bit. So that kind of intense tone that's all over the place where you're jumping in and out of consciousness and into one moment and one action sequence to him in bed to him over here, the show kind of settles down and shows you what it is. And then it becomes this kind of adventure movie kind of thing that we've seen a bunch of times. And that's where it kind of slowed down for me, where you start to introduce some of the kind of secondary cast and with I believe it's May uh Calamawy and
Calamawy.
Calamawy. Sorry,
Yeah.
thank you, Eric. Um, and I don't know, like as it goes on and it settles down, I just started to go, I don't know if I really love this. Like, I just don't know if it's nailing the action sequences. I don't know if it's nailing this tone that it's trying to go for. I love everyone involved. Like I like Ethan Hawke doing the kind of creepy cult leader stepping on glass in his shoes kind of thing. I love Oscar Isaac. It's just like him talking to, from Mark to Steven and then becoming Moon Knight. It just
Or Mr. Knight
something,
even.
yeah, and Mr. Knight, like it all just felt off a little bit. And
And again, to your point, partly intentional because of the
partly though,
character's own psychological makeup and how we're looking at this as, this has been marketed as Marvel's character study. And even Oscar
sure.
Isaac has talked about how like it's going back to Iron Man, where it is very self-contained. I think that is interesting,
Yeah.
where like watching this, there's not really
There's
a
some
lot,
Easter eggs, but not,
but they're not overt. Like it's not a
no,
way,
yeah.
it's like, okay, we're really selling you on the fact that
This is
this
the
is in the
MCU.
MCU. Like
Yeah.
you could be watching this and say like to yourself, oh, this truly does feel like its own thing. Like even Eternals has more references to, the bigger picture of what it's a
Thanos
part
is
of.
referenced by name and different
This
things.
is
Where in
not
this is
this.
like, you see the is it the GDC, that global like cleanup crew kind of thing that helped after or whatever. I
Yeah,
forget
and
the
Spider-Man
exact term.
Homecoming, right?
In
With Time
Homecoming,
Daly and yeah,
and
and
people
then
who helped after the snap and stuff like that. That crew that we saw in Falcon and Winter Soldier. There's like ads on a bus, and that's pretty much it.
well, they also mention is it Madripoor?
Oh, Madripoor. They do name
Yeah.
drop Madripoor. And those
So
aren't
those are
spoilers.
like
Those are
no,
just
no, no,
like
no, no. But those are like but other than that, that is maybe the one thing I do appreciate, that it does feel like okay, we're truly setting up a character within this universe, but at the same time we are going to let him do his own thing. But at the same time, it kind of feels again tonally off, because how do you include a character who is this violent in his actions? And again, how you depict this is really important, because are you depicting somebody with a mental illness as just irrational and violent and sporadic, and that doesn't look good. I think Oscar Isaac is um, very careful with how he portrays the role, but again,
yeah.
you do have scenes where the character can be extremely aggressive in how he handles certain villains, whether they be poorly composited CGI characters or not. There's a lot of bad CGI. I was thinking of the Michael Bay line in his press
Sure.
junket
Yeah.
for Ambulance, where it's like some of the CGI is not
We
great.
should say episode 4 was unfinished that
Yeah,
we saw.
I'm
So
talking more
let's
about
for the
episode
1
1.
through 3, there's some dodgy CG. And
Yeah,
I'm very curious. This always happens when we see stuff early. So
we talked about it with
it's
Pam
like,
and Tommy as well.
yeah, that I do want to go back and watch that first episode to see if that CG is as dodgy as it looked in this. But then also, like, I'll talk to you, we'll talk later, but like, I'm like, is that also, I'm just like, it could all be intentional, but I just don't think it is.
I don't either. And again, going back to the tonal thing, I think that is truly the key to this series. Two of the three directors, Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson and Moorhead, as they're known, who have directed movies like The Endless and Spring, and are kind of known as genre horror filmmakers. Their last movie they did was a movie that Matt and I did not really care for, Synchronic, but they it does almost feel like those guys specifically kind of signed on to this because they saw it almost like a way to make something similar to what Sam Raimi did with the Spider-Man trilogy, the original Spider-Man movies, where you look at what Sam Raimi interjected within those films. There's both slapstick that's inspired by the Three Stooges, but then there's also a ton of horror references. And even like during Peter Parker, when he's bitten by the spider and he goes through his transformation and he has kind of like that fever dream, there are moments that are lifted from Mario Bava Giallo movies, like
Yeah.
inserted, and this has
Oh my
a
God.
direct reference to that, which is very funny. But tonally, again, I think
That's going to be jarring to a lot of people.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think.
Like I think like I don't. We both don't mind
I
multiple
loved that.
tones. Well, that is
Sure.
a good scene, but I'm talking about multiple tones within
Yeah.
the one movie.
But
I
it's
mean,
a
like
tricky thing, though.
it is like we talk about that a lot with Bong Joon Ho's films, where like he can go
He's a
from
master of
drama
that.
to action in one sequence, and if you're
Or
unable
comedy.
if you're unable to stick that landing, you're gonna just slide all over the place, and the film just kind of feels confused and awkward at times, and it has this kind of, not, I don't want to say amateur quality, but it doesn't feel like the filmmaking is completely
Mhm.
assertive in what it wants to do because
Mhm.
of that. And again, like, knowing the work of those two directors, I can maybe see what they were going for. But if I didn't know who they were, and I'm watching this just as
Week
like
to week,
somebody
like, yeah.
who's watched the other MCU stuff, I'm gonna think to myself, what is this?
Yeah. And I do think that Ethan Hawke's villain gets a little goofy at times, and I just don't think that totally works. Like, I feel like it undercuts his kind of I don't know, disturbing nature. I will say, as a positive, like, I do like the MCU exploring other cultures and areas in the world that we haven't really gotten a lot of. Like, uh, too much we're focused in the United States, too much we're focused on New York and things like that. So to explore Egypt and the Egyptian culture and stuff like that, I think is uh is interesting and is a cool thing to kind of see in the MCU, to explore these different areas and different places. And I will say that I actually do like that quite a bit. But yeah, I'm kind of with you where it just feels like episode 1, I was like, okay, this is strange, not what I was expecting, not Doctor Strange.
No.
But I'm kind of into it. And that's episode 2, I kind of felt the same. There's this wild choice that Eric and I know what they're referencing, but I feel like a lot of people won't, and they'll just think it's strange and an
Or they think there's
interesting
something
choice.
wrong with their
I honestly
TV.
rewound for a second because I was like, there's no way they just did that. I
Yeah.
was like, there's no way. Like, if people thought the Book of Boba Fett going into the Bacta tank, is it Bacta, right?
Yeah.
Back to tank with the kind of grindhousey, you know, thing when he would go in was weird, because I heard people talk about that. They're like, it's gonna be like when that scene happens, and it's nothing even too crazy. It's just such an interesting filmmaking choice for a Marvel Studios project on Disney Plus, where it's like
You'd
tonally
expect it in an Edgar Wright movie than you
and yeah,
would.
yeah, and tonally, it's like it doesn't even like keep that all the way
No.
through.
It's
So
like just
it's
one
just
shot.
so it's so interesting, and then that's what I struggle with is like, yes, I do really think that they're doing it intentionally because they want to put you in Mark's headspace. And like, and I will say, like, I started to enjoy it a little bit less through episode 3, and I think you were at the same boat as me in episode 3, where they're in a boat in episode 3 at one point. And
Great.
I I started to go, I don't know if I really like this. And I'm like, I don't not like it. I just don't really like it. And I'm just kind of going through the motions here. And I'm like, it hasn't got its hooks in me from any aspect. Like, and I love, like, I go back, I love everyone involved, but I'm like, it's not like, again, introducing a new character like Shang-Chi. I was invested all the way through the action sequences, the characters, like everything,
And
where
the father-son
it's
story was very
story right
universal
off
in
the
its
bat,
depiction. Yeah.
right? Where when they go into some of the, Egyptian god stuff in this, and like giving the backstory, we don't even know much about Moon Knight. We know a little bit about Khonshu and like what's going on. But as it went on, it felt, pretty straightforward adventure movie kind of thing. And there's some B plots that aren't super interesting. Um, and then when the show starts to kind of show you what it is, I'm like, this is not what I expected, and I don't know if I really like this. That being said, like I mentioned off the top, I understand why they gave us 4 episodes. And I will say the end of episode 4 got its hooks in me. And maybe I'm a sucker for the MCU. Maybe I'm just looking for a reason to just like everything that they put out. But episodes 3 and half of 4, I was like, I don't know where they're going with this. I don't know if I care. But then something happens, and the last 20 minutes of episode 4, I was like, huh, I have no idea where they're going with this, and I'm very intrigued. And I didn't think I was going to say that at the episode at the end of episode 4, because I was ready to be like, I don't really care about this. So I think it's not without its problems, but I will say that I am very interested to see where the next 2 episodes go, and that it has made me want to rewatch those first 4 episodes after seeing the 4th. Um so and that's just, I loved the last 20 minutes of episode 4, and I thought I was really intrigued at what they're doing, and I can't wait, to talk about it after the episode comes out, and in a more kind of spoilery fashion.
Yeah, I think if they had gotten to what you're referring to sooner,
Yeah.
like maybe in the 3rd
Yeah,
episode,
I
it
agree with
would have
that though.
kept the interest a little bit. Like, I am having the opposite reaction that I had with Eternals, where I think Eternals would work better as
As a
a 6
miniseries?
to 8
Yeah,
episode series, where Moon Knight I think would work fine
as a
as
movie.
a 2-hour film. and like I don't know what the decision was there to
I
go
think
with
for something like this, like an ending, like where you go, holy shit, how are they gonna keep doing that, or what are they gonna do now? I think
right.
like that week to week kind of stuff. I don't know if you needed 6 hours to tell this
But
story. We'll
but
see.
Eternals, you could do that though as well.
Yeah.
You could also do like, oh, how are they gonna like
Oh, I
continue
think
on with
Eternals should have
that?
been a show.
Yeah.
I agree with
Where
you.
with Moon Knight, I could see Moon Knight working fine as a movie.
I
Like
agree
I
with
think it
that as
could be a
well.
2-hour film, and you'd be in and out. And I
It'll
mean,
be
it probably would be.
220. Come on.
Yeah, like let's be honest. That's the shortest runtime for an MCU movie now. But yeah, it's like one of those things where there's enough intrigue there in that last 20 minutes, but it could have gotten there sooner. I'm not the biggest fan of the Layla character. I also
Yeah.
agree with you with Ethan Hawke, even though I like that he's kind of having fun with the role. He weirdly reminds me of horror fans will know this, Richard Lynch in Bad Dreams, where he plays
Okay.
like this psych ward doctor who's basically like torturing all his patients, and even has a similar hairstyle. So I don't think they probably based it on him, but I wouldn't be surprised if, again, because those guys are horror fans, and Mohammed Diab is also the other director who makes up the three guys who are directing this
They split the
season.
episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're watching this, and the best stuff in this show is the relationship between Mark and Steven with Conchu. I think that
Yeah.
is the strongest element, when it's this kind of like it there's this weird love-hate relationship with all three of these characters, where like obviously Mark and Steven are at odds and they're always fighting with each other, and it kind of, I think Steven does get a little grating at times, where it's like, okay, I understand that you're fighting for your identity and your own life, and you want to have that, but at the same time it's like, when you get into these dangerous situations, you eventually call on Mark, and you're just using him, and Steven can also just be like, again, the accent, I think it becomes a little tiresome after a while, but when
Again, I
you
think it's intentional, but yeah.
no, I know, but like he's just annoying in that kind of way that it's like, dude, enough, man. Like I don't like, I think you're supposed to be somewhat sympathetic to
Sure.
Steven, but like there's a point
But
where
I
you're
also
just,
think you're supposed to be a little annoyed with him
I know,
too.
but you get sick of him, and then like even with Mark, like Mark is
Yeah, you
not the
never want to get sick of a character, that's for sure.
Yeah, especially when he's going to be set up as an ongoing hero, and also when you have someone like Oscar Isaac, who is a really good actor in that role. But I think like what kind of works best is when you have F. Murray Abraham's voice performance just kind of literally like, I need to use you because you're my avatar, and like
Very
you need,
Venom.
yeah, you need to do my bidding, but he also is like, but I also need you, Mark.
Yeah.
Like it's this, I think it is a
Venom,
better,
man.
I think it is a better, well, it's also brain damage, like
Sure.
again,
Which
like
we
I'm
also
sure,
referenced in Venom.
yes, and I'm sure Benson and Moorhead are
Are
aware
fans
of
of
these
that. Oh,
things,
totally.
and even Diab in terms of what they're doing, and what have you. But
I like the
yeah,
imagery of Conchu just like always watching and stuff like that. I thought
yeah,
that was
yeah,
cool.
yeah. I mean, he's the best version of Birdman. And
Yeah.
I actually was like, oh man, I would, like, if I was a kid, I would buy an action figure
A
of
Conchu
this,
one.
of
Yeah.
Conchu. Yeah, and so I think that works the best, and I think it was really smart to have such an amazing voice as someone like F. Murray Abraham's kind of like come in and just literally be so crusty and craggy to these two characters, and then also kind of him kind of being an outlier within the God community, which I also
Yeah.
find funny, because it's almost like he's like puts up this big front of being this guy who wants to deliver justice but do it the right way, and then like he's been excommunicated by his own group, and
The
it's
God
just like,
PTA meeting.
yeah, and I do find that actually
Yeah.
kind of funny, because it's not yeah, that's the other thing, like humor wise there's really
Yeah.
not a lot there,
I did
and
laugh quite a bit in the first episode. And
I
I think
think the
it's
thing I
intentional.
laughed at the most was the one shot we've talked about, but I do
Oh,
I do like the
absolutely. I
idea of
cackled.
like this one guy saying, like, it's almost like that older kid who looks cool to the younger group, but then like in his own age range he's a loser. And
Sure,
that's kind of
yeah.
what Conchu is, and that's what kind of made me laugh. This is also the last on-screen appearance of Gaspar Ulliel, who's in episode 3 And again, I think some of the action sequences are poorly choreographed and edited
Yeah.
together, where it's hard to follow what is going on from scene to scene, and not just the two personalities fighting for dominance, but just how the action plays out. And I
How
think,
Moon Knight looks when he's fighting and stuff
yeah, and
too.
who he's fighting and where
Yeah.
he's fighting, and like just the geography of it all. And then there's just something weird with one sequence in that last act of episode 3 that kind of feels like they changed something because of Gaspar Ulli's death.
It's
Again,
possible.
yeah, it's speculative, obviously, but like it just is a weird sequence in
I
terms
thought
of how
most of the
they kind of.
action scenes were kind of strange. Like, and I don't love the look, and I think it's maybe because it's a completely CG suit, or it looks like it's completely CG, that there's just something off about Moon Knight, how he looks and how he fights. And because it does look completely CG, right? Like the
Yeah.
suit, like I'm pretty sure it is.
Well, I mean, with Marvel, I mean, you have to even assume like just backdrops now
I
are
know.
CGI. Like,
Yeah.
there's that one shot of Tony Ravioli
Yeah.
on the phone where it's like, I was like, oh wow, that was just him
Someone was like,
with
"That's
a.
probably a scheduling thing." Like they
Yeah,
had to get all of his shit done in like because he's only in a couple scenes in that movie. Because I think the party was also green screen that he was
yeah.
at. Like everything
Well,
he
that's what I
did
was talking
was
about.
just yeah. Oh, sorry, I thought you meant the one on the street
No,
when
no,
he's
no.
on the
The one
phone.
when he's like on
Is
the
that the
phone
party?
at the
Yeah,
party talking to
yeah.
like, oh, if you can reach the
Okay,
head of the
yeah. Okay,
administration
sorry. I
office.
thought I
Yeah.
was talking about the one on the street,
So
which he was
so with
also.
Marvel,
Yeah.
you have to just assume that everything other than the Eternals is completely green screen.
Yeah. Here they do go to some locations. Like we said, the best looking stuff is when they're in Budapest and
Yeah,
like not
and they go into like a small
they're not
village.
in Budapest in the show, but like that's where they shot a lot of the series. And like yeah, they go into a village and like some of this, like I said, that stuff. I think the boat might have been CG because the lighting looked off, but like I mean, they still got time to polish some of this stuff. So maybe episodes 2 through 4 are also kind of like, still tweaking, but 4 was completely unfinished, which quickly, like that, not part of our review, is a cool thing to kind of see as a fan is like seeing a Marvel Studios project like unfinished was kind of wild. And I know no one will be able to see that, but it was just cool for me um, seeing that, even if it was jarring to see an unfinished piece of CG or some very awkward ADR inserted or something like
Yeah,
that. But like, it didn't hurt it because I think episode 4, like I said, that last half of episode 4, I thought was great. And um, I really made me kind of recontextualized what I saw before and made me second guess everything that I thought about the series where I was like, "Oh, okay. I want to rewatch these now and see like, when I was struggling to see if I liked that first episode and some of episode 2 and then the stuff I didn't really like in 2 and 3 and some of 4, I'm like I kind of want to go back and rewatch it now." So, I will say it ends on a really intriguing spot. So, if you're struggling through episodes 1, 2 or 3, um I say stick with it. Get to that 4th episode and see if it works that or if you're intrigued by where it ends in episode 4. And if you're out by that point and you're not intrigued, then I'd say it's probably just not for you.
yeah.
If you are intrigued, I think then you might do the same thing I did, where you might want to go back and rewatch it and kind of give it another shot and catch up again to that by that next week and see where episode 5 and 6 are going because it's unprecedented for them to give us 2/3 of a series before it comes out. But I really think that they were like, man, this is a show that I know there's only 6 episodes, but episode 4 is going to be that one that probably, you know, people talk about or get their hooks in people, where 1 to 3
Well, it's
are,
enough of a cliffhanger, right? Like, it's almost the
yeah.
way that like a Netflix show, like at the end of every episode that keeps you watching, is like they have that sort of designed cliffhanger where it's like, oh, and then this stuff happens, and then you're gonna have to watch the
Oh,
next
totally. Which
episode.
is TV TV in a
Yeah.
nutshell. But like,
But the first
I
three
don't,
episodes didn't do
don't,
that.
not necessarily. That's why I think, just to hypothesize why they did it is just like why they gave us this is because I think they might have worried that if they gave us 2 episodes or they gave us 1 or 3 is just like we might have been like it's weird, and
Well,
like
also, I
it
think you
doesn't
need
really
time to
work.
adjust, right?
Yeah,
So if you get 4 instead of 2 or 3, you're kind of trying to gauge, okay, like what kind of tone it's playing in,
yeah.
what the atmosphere is like,
But
how
that's why.
it's both
Sorry,
different
keep
and
going.
similar to other superhero stories
Other
within the
Marvel
canon.
stuff,
Yeah,
yeah. Like
and like again,
there is
the
nothing like this show in the MCU. I will kind of say that a
no, but I
little bit.
will say that like it is very similar to, like, it does feel like it is borrowing from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man
Sure.
movies and also even the first Blade film, where like
Yeah,
it is
that's
trying to
fair.
be a little bit edgier in how, you're portraying this character, but I don't know if it again, I don't think there's any malice, but I don't know if it's completely sensitive to the subject matter of
Sure.
what's going on here
But then
either,
I
which,
gotta wait to see those last couple episodes to see how it handles
well, I'm
that,
not.
which
Yeah,
is
I mean, I'm not going to judge like the full. It's not like you
of
judge a book
course,
by its
yeah.
cover, or in the
By
case of
the
Dune, you only did judge it by half a
if they
film.
gave you 2/3 though.
Yeah, but still, like, you need to see the whole thing,
I
because like when
absolutely
you're
agree. We're
watching a
not gonna put a
movie,
score on this, yeah.
no, you can't just say like, oh, well, I saw enough of it to make a final judgment on it, because like even if a movie still doesn't work or a show doesn't work, and you're like 2/3 of the way through, and then you watch the last little bit of it, it's like, okay, there could be some good stuff there that does
Mhm.
work or does kind of redeem the series, even if it doesn't completely salvage what they were going for. But I
Yeah.
think in terms of its ambition, I appreciate. I
Yeah.
think the two leads are good enough actors, even though Oscar Isaac is the one that's kind of really doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to the performances he's giving. I think Kanju is a great kind of foil to Stephen and Mark. uh I like the design of Moon Knight, even though I don't like the CGI. Like, I think
Yeah.
the look of him he kind of reminds me of the Phantasm from
Totally.
Batman, Mask of
Yeah.
the
Yeah, yeah,
Phantasm.
yeah.
And I even like the idea of like the eyes, like even when he's Mr. Knight, he just kind of almost looks like
I like the look of Mr.
Deadpool.
Knight too. Yeah, like I'm with you there. I like the look of the show at times. It was hard with the giant watermark, but
He
like
looks like a
I
fancy
liked
waiter when he's
that's
Mr.
I
Knight.
know, but I still there's something about it that I
Oh,
kind
I
of
do
like.
too.
And like
Yeah.
with yeah. I like some of the cinematography. I do agree with you that sometimes it doesn't look super great and it depends on the location and the green screen stuff and all that. But like they
Yeah.
do try to do again, it's very playful in the way that it's moving the camera to try again it's off-putting but playful where it's just trying to get you kind of tossed up and confused and stuff, which I go back to all of that being very intentional. Does it completely work? I don't know yet, and that's where I'm like, again, I don't want to say I dislike the show because I don't think I do. uh and I'm very intrigued at where it left me. So if you would have caught me after episodes 2 or 3, I would have been like, I don't know. So episode 4, I'm really looking forward to the next 2 episodes, but I think it's rough around the edges. We didn't talk, like, I think the script is clunky at times as
Ugh.
well. It's
The
very
exposition
clunky. Yeah.
specifically, like in how it's
Um,
handling all the Egyptian
yeah.
theology, and um
What
some of
Mark's going
the
through and
yeah,
like,
and some of
yeah.
the character introductions, and
Yeah.
just even like what
All the
not only
stuff with
Mark is going
him
through, but
and
how he's
yeah,
pitted against Ethan Hawke's villain character. Like it just kind of spells everything out
it's
for you.
very clunky. And like with
Yeah.
the Layla character, like everything with her and her history is
You don't
incredibly
care.
clunky and like
McClunky.
McClunky. And like it's going back to Star Wars. Um yeah, that's what I mean. Like the dialogue as you're going through, and that's the stuff that kind of threw me off. Is like it's yeah, the filmmaking is kind of out there in those first 2 episodes where it's really kind of like, oh my god, the tone on this show is all over the place. And then when you get to the script and the dialogue and moving the plot forward and stuff like that, like that's the stuff where I'm like, okay, it's almost like they're like, how do we put people in Mark's headspace? But then no one really went, okay, well, we got to make sure we have like a really tight script here too.
Yeah. And we
And
have to do this right. Like we have to make
yeah,
sure that we do not, like, again, look like we're being completely insensitive and
yeah,
disrespectful to
yeah,
people that have this disorder. And like again, when you're depicting mental illness in sort of, I mean,
genre or
any, but
superhero or
yeah,
like, yeah,
it's such a delicate tightrope to walk, because you're kind of like, okay, how do you use this as both, because like it's part a plot device, and then also it's like, okay, well, this is a character who, you know is going through something very, personal and internalized, and you don't want to make light of it.
Yeah.
And it's a weird place to be sometimes for genre stuff. And like, you can do it. I mean, genre is a metaphor for many things, whether it be mental illness or just what's going on in the world. But you do have to walk that fine line, and here it sometimes kind of feels like a caricature, and to the point where, like, again, I've talked about this on the regular show, where like the split personality stuff, and even like, again, the Spider-Man movies, like, I'm not the biggest fan of Norman Osborn's
Sure,
dual
yeah.
identity,
Yeah.
or Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies, or even when you mention
Yeah.
James McAvoy's, even though his performances are very good in
Yeah.
Split.
It's same like Oscar Isaac in this, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like, and I mean, I made a joke about it on Twitter, but it is funny that, like, the beginning of the show begins with a Bob Dylan song, and then at one point, Oscar Isaac, when he's heading to work, says he feels like he was hit by a bus, and it just reminded me of the movie Life Itself, because in that movie, someone gets hit by a bus, and then also in one scene, Oscar Isaac is in a Starbucks shouting about how great Bob Dylan is, and it's just like, oh no,
For all
like,
the
this is.
crossover of people who have seen Life Itself and huge MCU stands.
Yeah, but in terms of the Paul Schrader universe, it is interesting that literally Isaac went right from the card counter to this, and the reason why Ethan Hawke signed up to it, because he hadn't read the script or scripts, was because he wanted to work with Oscar Isaac. So those two guys together. I really like the idea. I really do like to pretend that this is like second reform,
Oh man, yeah.
but
The
yeah,
card
it's just.
reformer.
And maybe again, it's just also expectations, because going into Eternals, you were expecting, oh man, this is gonna like revitalize and change,
It's gonna be
the
different.
way we exactly, and
Yeah.
it is,
but not.
But it's not. It's
in a way
again,
that you're like, oh, maybe I wanted it to be more the same, and then like.
yeah,
Or like I love a lot of stuff that Chloe Zhao did in that movie, right? Shooting on
or tried to
location
do.
and like or tried to do, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I sort of comparisons to Eternals is interesting, and I'm very curious to see what people think week to week. It's gonna be fascinating. Like I'm very curious to see what, huge MCU fans think. I know there are hardcore Moon Knight fans where this is a big moment for them, and then maybe they're more acclimated to the tone and who Mark is and the character and stuff like that. But then I really do feel like I don't know, like I have a feeling you're gonna get people after those first couple episodes going like, I don't know, but
Or they'll
we'll
wait
see.
until like the whole season is done and then go
Yeah.
back to it if they're not hooked on it originally. Because again, I think what Kevin Feige has done with the MCU is that the brand name itself is able to get people to watch.
People will watch, yeah, for sure.
Anything, right? Like, as long as you slap that on there and have some references, or at least promise that this is going to connect
Character
in
will
some
come
way.
back, or there'll be
Yeah.
mini universe, or not a universe, a subsect of characters like Werewolf by Night, Moon Knight,
Yeah.
Blade.
Again, not to be confused with Ben Affleck's Live by Night, which is not a
Yeah.
part of the MCU, but yeah, like that is, I mean, that might be interesting in itself, because again, like, you're looking at Eternals, which also kind of introduced Blade, and then you have this, and then you have Werewolf by Night, and a Blade movie coming down the pipe as well. So like, you can tell like these characters are kind of like the quote unquote more darker, edgier. Yeah, they are really the dark universe characters.
They're the Midnight Suns. That's what they'll probably lead into, which is like, it's cool. I'm
sounds like
again,
a Soundgarden song. Midnight Sun,
don't you come? Let's wrap.
I also want to say, and I
okay.
just want to quickly say,
no,
people who love Moonlight, we are not
Moonlight or Moon Knight.
Moon Knight.
Okay, I think you said Moonlight.
Well, Night Bright. People who like Night Bright, the Moon Knight fans, we are not dismissing your love of the character,
totally, yeah.
or if you love the show. We are being critical of
or you
something.
Want to love the show if you're listening to this before.
yeah. We are being critical of something that we have seen and how it played for us.
And I really want to hear what you guys think, because again, like, it's.
But that does not call for people being assholes
No, because our friend
in the
Shay from
comments
the movie,
section.
I want to, yeah, that's something that we should say. Like Twitter reactions have been out there, and like some people are being very rude to Shay from the
Oh,
movie
racist.
podcast and racist, yeah, and just awful. So fuck those people, and like wait till you see a show. Don't get
Before
mad beforehand.
Yeah,
It's just
before
like
criticizing the
someone
critics.
for not
Watch it
liking
first
it.
and then
Like
make your own decision.
if you
Be
love it, and
excited to
yeah.
listen to us talk about it if you like listening to us. God knows
And
why
don't
you
let
listen
us
to us.
disappoint you. Again, it's a
Yeah.
very complicated feeling for me because I'm like, I'm all over the place, just like the show is all over the place. Where I'm like, parts of it I really like, parts of it I really don't like, but I'm very intrigued for a month from now when I can see the next episode and
Or
that,
how he
that
will fit
yeah,
into the
and
bigger
how they're gonna
scheme of
if they can
things.
stick this landing, or if they can just land this plane, because it's a little shaky right now, but I think we could still get there because I am very intrigued for episodes 5 and 6. So thank you all for listening. We really, or watching, we really do appreciate it. Oh my god, it's been a long 24 hours. Go listen to our Oscars recap, which is our 119th episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast. You can find that on podcast services everywhere and on YouTube. Check out our other reviews. You guys could check out right now our Everything Everywhere All at Once review. And if you're a Marvel fan and you're listening to this or watching this, go watch or listen to that review and go see that movie, because if you want a little preview of some multiverse stuff, and probably multiverse done even better than what Marvel is doing. It's just I mean, like, and Marvel's doing it in a cool way too, don't get me wrong.
Should
But
have done like a
like
freeze frame on that shot.
but I really think it's a spectacular movie. So go and I think, produced by the Russo brothers, if you didn't know that.
Yep. They
Go out and
kind
see
of
that
made up for
movie.
Cherry.
They kind of did. So go check that out as well. One stop shop. Just head over to Untitled_movies over on Letterboxd. You can go check me on the VOD for the Kind of Funny morning show this week, where I talked about the Oscars with the Kind of Funny crew with Nick Scarpino and Snowball
But not
Mike. And
Oscar Isaac.
no, we did not. I was still embargoed at
Who's
that
not
time.
nominated, who's not been nominated for an Oscar, but should have been for Inside Llewyn Davis,
I agree.
which also has Bob Dylan references.
Thank you so much. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, mostly at untitledmoviepodcast.com, and you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchand. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Okay, who do you think has the bigger social media following, Harry Styles or F. Murray Abraham? Because they're both teen heartthrobs.